Good evening, councillors, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to welcome you this evening to the council meeting. My name is Councillor Robert Rigby and I am the Lord Mayor of Westminster. As mentioned at the last meeting, there is a new sound system in the chamber. The microphones on your desks will be controlled by the sound engineer, so please do not move these or switch them on or off. Please face forward as much as possible when speaking so that we can ensure that your voice is picked up. As ever, we are live streaming this meeting and therefore microphones will be active when members are speaking and the cameras will be broadcasting until the meeting closes. A list of all the members who are present will be recorded in the minutes of the meeting. As this will be a busy meeting, I would like to remind members to be as succinct as possible in their speeches and questions so that we can cover all the business we need to do. Before we start the formal meeting, I would like to ask members to join me in a minute's silence in remembering two former councillors who sadly passed away recently. Former Regent's Park councillor Gwyneth Hampson passed away last month. She represented the ward in 2002 until 2014. During her time at the council, she held the position of Deputy Cabinet Member for Housing and then Leisure and Lifelong Learning, and sat on various overview and scrutiny committees and the General Purposes Committee. Former Westbourne Ward councillor Sergey Lowry passed away in September. He represented the ward from 1971 to 1974, and then went on to become the leader of the London Borough of Richmond upon Thames for nearly 30 years. Can I ask members to now stand and join me in remembering the former councillors Hampson and Lowry? Thank you. Agenda item 1, appointment of relief chair. As I may need to vacate the chair during the meeting, I propose that Councillor Patricia McAllister be chosen to take the chair as necessary. May I please have a seconder for my motion? Councillor Ormsby has seconded my motion that Councillor McAllister chairs the meeting as necessary. Unless any other member objects, the motion will be deemed to have been agreed. If anyone has an objection, please say so now. Thank you. Councillor McAllister, please join me on the dais. Good evening. Thank you. Agenda item 2, minutes from the previous meeting. Unless any member wishes to raise a point of order relating to the accuracy of these minutes, I will consider that members are content that I sign the minutes from the last meeting. Please state now if you wish to raise a point of order. Thank you. The minutes are agreed. Agenda item 3, Lord Mayor's communications. These are set out in the meeting papers. Agenda item 4, declarations of interest. It is necessary to declare any interest in relation to the issues on which there will be a vote. These items were set out alongside the list of speakers on the order paper. members need to declare an interest in the item selected for debate if they are speaking in that debate. All members in attendance were asked to identify in advance of the meeting if they have an interest to declare. If anyone has any disclosable pecuniary interests or any other significant interests to declare, please do so now. Councillor Swaddle.
Yes, I have a pecuniary interest in item 12 and will not be participating in the vote.
That's noted. Thank you. Agenda item 5, there is no statement on urgent matters. Agenda item 6, councillor presentations, presented petitions and deputations. All councillors are asked to notify in advance of the meeting if they have a petition that they wish to present. I'm not aware of any petitions. However, if anyone has one that they would like to present, please mention it now. Thank you. Agenda item 7, public participation. Each member of the public selected for this item and here this evening has submitted a question which they would like to present to the relevant cabinet member. They will have up to 2 minutes to present their question, and then the relevant cabinet member will have up to 2 minutes to respond. Can I ask, when you are presenting your question, you adhere to the question you submitted, which you have a copy of? Can I also ask the cabinet members who are responding to be succinct in your response? There will be no right of a reply. I ask that once you have received your response, you kindly take your seat. All questions asked and responses provided will be made available on the Council's website in the days after the meeting. Can I now ask Mohammed Hassan to join us at the front of the chamber to ask his question? Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, this is an open question for everyone in the Council. A Freedom of Information response disclosed that the Westminster City Council Pension Fund invests millions in firms who trade with the Israeli state. In September, a UN General Assembly resolution called on states to cease provision of arms, munitions, and related equipment to Israel. What steps is Westminster Council taking to adopt an ethical investment policy and to follow other investors such as USS, which is the UK's largest pension fund, and heed the UN General Assembly resolution? And what justification can it give for continued investment in companies such as BAE Systems and Caption?
Thank you, Mr. Hussain. I think, Mr. Hussain, thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, sir. Okay, so you can. Sorry, excuse me. Sorry, could you come back and stand here, because I need you to hear the response, and then at the appropriate time I will then tell you you can take your seat. Thank you. It's courtesy. Thank you. I now ask the Chair of the Pension Fund Committee, Councillor Eagleton, to respond.
Thank you for your question, Mr. Hassan. The ongoing conflict in the Middle East is tragic and something which I know many people have different and strongly held political views on. As a pension fund committee, our objective is to ensure that our members get the pensions they're entitled to in retirement by making decisions that are prudent and guided by our responsible investment statement. This is what's known as the fiduciary duty. The authoritative legal advice on the fiduciary duty is that while councils can consider ethical considerations when making investments, the power of investment can only be made for investment, not political purposes. So what does that mean? It means that a council like Westminster can and does use investments to pursue goals like decarbonisation, because we believe that's in the long-term interests of both the fund and our members. What it doesn't mean is that councils can use pension funds as a political vehicle to pursue their own independent foreign policy. And this point is crucial because you mentioned the university's superannuation scheme. And you're right, the USS did recently reduce its exposure to the Middle East, but they clarified in a public statement, and I quote, "Some commentators have stated or implied that we have excluded Israel from our investment portfolio. We have not. also wrong to state or imply that our decisions were made for anything other than financial reasons. From Westminster's perspective, our exposure to the region is actually negligible because we invest in broad funds rather than specific shareholdings. Nonetheless, we do view the ongoing conflict as a financial risk, and while today that risk has not led us to take any specific investment decisions, we continue to actively monitor the situation, and we will continue to act in the best interests of our members and in accordance with our responsible investment statement.
Thank you, Councillor Middleton. And thank you, Mr. Hussain. Can I now ask Melda Kelem-K-Soy to join us at the front of the chamber to ask her question? Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Hi all, thanks so much for being here and accepting my question. I'm very excited to ask this question. I live near Queen's Park Community Gardens and I'm a PhD researcher specialising in the environmental and health benefits of plant-based diets.
That's all. Yes. Sorry, that's fine.
Okay. So here's my question to Westminster Council. Plant-based diets result in 75% less greenhouse gas emissions and land use than diets with 100 grams of meat daily. They cut wildlife destruction by 66% and water use by 54%. An analysis by the Office of Health Economics shows that plant-based diets would save the NHS a whopping £6.7 billion yearly, with 2.1 million fewer cases of disease. Research consistently shows that local governments are trusted more than national politicians, making the council well positioned to introduce plant-based initiatives and deliver public education. Please, could Westminster Council follow the lead of 33 towns and cities worldwide, including Edinburgh, Lambeth and Amsterdam, by endorsing the plant-based treaty and creating a plant-based action plan? Thank you.
Thank you. Can I ask... Thank you. Can I now ask the Cabinet Member for Climate, Ecology and Culture, Councillor Jude, to respond? Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Good evening. First, thank you so much for coming down just to answer the question. Great to see so many of you here as well. I saw everyone with T-shirts when I was walking in to discuss a really important topic. Here in Westminster, we take the climate and ecological emergencies really seriously. You've seen that we ranked the... Is that okay? Yep. We were ranked the top single-tier council in the country for our climate action plan last year. We declared an ecological emergency last year, and we're doing all we can to make sure that we're combating these crises. But I always say I'm always welcome to hear more about what we potentially could be doing. And it's great to hear that you take part in the Queen's Park Community Garden. We're really pleased to be able to support that as a council as well. I'll just say that we recognise the many positive environmental impacts that are associated with some of the actions and the ideas in the treaty. And please do send the full thing over to me so I can give it a read, make sure the team have a look at it. And I know we've already implemented some of the proposals in the treaty. For example, our climate and ecological emergencies, designing public information campaigns to raise awareness about the climate and to give residents a chance to invest in sustainable projects, which we did through our Westminster Green Investment, which hopefully you guys saw. We'll hopefully get another one out in the future, which you can invest in as well. We also recognise the beneficial health impacts that can come from plant-based diets. For example, Unity Works, the cafe provider we have in City Hall, does a meat-free Monday, which has been very popular. I've been told by a lot of people they enjoy popping up on a Monday. And we also support the London Eat Like a Londoner campaign, part of the One World Living programme, which we work to help promote a more plant-based diet. So we're doing some things already, but the timing's good for you to ask this question, because last full council we published our first screening of biodiversity strategy. And so we're currently developing an action plan out of the back of that. So please send me over the more details, and happy to talk further as well.
Okay.
Oh, well, I'll make sure you get it afterwards. I'll get someone to send it to you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Kelem-K-Soy. I hope I pronounced that correct.
Terrace
Oak Dew site.
site.
Okay,
Right, the next
thank you. You may return to your seat. Thank you. Can I now ask Suzette Hayes to join us at the front of the chamber to ask her question, please? Hello.
Good evening.
Good evening.
In light of the new Ebury Bridge road redevelopment, please can I ask the council to review the traffic access to this area? The system of no right turns and no left turns on the surrounding roads means that the vast majority of traffic, bicycles, cars and large lorries can only access via Pimlico Road and the narrow St Barnabas Street. This is creating significant congestion and danger to pedestrians in the area, and as a local resident, it's a big issue. Has the council also coordinated with Kensington and Chelsea Council on these arrangements? Thank you.
Thank you for your question. I now ask the Cabinet Member for City Management and Air Quality, Councillor de Mildenberg, to respond accordingly. Thank you.
Thank you, Lord Mayor, and thank you, Suzette, for your question. I understand that the banned turns that you refer to relate to the Transport for London strategic road network, and they're not controlled by the City Council. We do believe that the banned turns were installed by TfL as safety measures. And as far as we're aware as well, TfL did consult with the Royal Borough of Kensington and Chelsea before implementing these changes on Grosvenor Road.
Yeah, and
But-
we responded
Sorry.
to that. Sorry.
But-
Oh, no, okay,
fine.
sorry.
But I will check with Transport for London on all these details to ensure that you get a full response to your inquiry.
Thank you.
Thank
Can
you.
I ask?
No
No.
supplementary question.
Okay,
Sorry.
thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Ms Hayes. Thank you. And finally, can I ask Noreen Rahman to join us at the front of the chamber to ask her question, please? Thank you.
Hi. I seek clarity on how Westminster Council can allow the opaque process surrounding Jubilee Hall Gym's lease surrender to continue unchecked. Jubilee Hall has served as a key community asset in Covent Garden, providing vital health, wellness and social benefits, particularly to vulnerable groups. How does the Council reconcile its commitments to transparency, community welfare and public consultation with the lack of accountability demonstrated by Jubilee Hall Trust's trustees? Why was no public consultation held before this significant decision? And what oversight does the Council maintain over such impactful moves? Has the Council explored alternative strategies to secure the gym's future without lease surrender or sale? Given the implications for community health, well-being and heritage, I urge the Council to pause this process, hold a public forum to assess community needs and work collaboratively to preserve this essential facility.
Thank you. Could I ask Councillor Barraclough, the Cabinet Member for Planning and Economic Development, to respond, please?
Thanks so much for your question and coming to ask it. I know how much the Jubilee Hall means to the community in Covent Garden. To give it a little background, the hall was saved from demolition in the 1970s to the great credit of local campaigners. And the lease on the hall was granted on a peppercorn rent to the Jubilee Hall charity that runs a gym in the space. The freehold of the building is not owned by the council, it's owned by Shaftesbury Capital. The charity no longer wants to operate the space and plan to surrender the lease to Shaftesbury in return for a cash payment. In response to representations from the community, I've met with both the CEO of the charity and senior management from Shaftesbury to press the community's case that the gym should retain and remain in the hall, and indeed so has the council's Director of Leisure Services. However, the charity is adamant that the gym is not commercially viable and it can pursue its objectives more effectively elsewhere. Shaftesbury tell me they've offered alternative space nearby if the charity wants to relocate the gym. Meanwhile, the campaigners have very sensibly applied that the hall be listed as an asset of community value, and officers are looking at the application now, and I'm expecting their recommendation shortly. However, in normal circumstances, an ACV will give community groups the right to pause the sale of an asset and give them time to put together a counter bid. But in this instance, the transaction is not a sale of an asset, but the surrender of a lease. And our legal advice is that the granting of an ACV would not call a halt to the process. It won't affect the decision of whether or not we grant an ACV. I just don't think it's going to be as effective as it normally would be. So, returning to your question, the Council has no formal role in the operation of charities or the commercial arrangements between a charity and its landlord. The decision on whether to operate the gym or surrender the lease is a question for the charity and its trustees alone. Now, the trustees of the Jubilee Hall Gym must abide by the rules governing charities, and any concerns about their actions should be directed to the Charity Commission, who have the regulatory powers to intervene. We do not. Neither can we compel them or anybody else to run a consultation. What we can do, apologies Lord Mayor, almost finished, what we can do is to continue strongly encouraging the parties to sit down with the community and reach a common agreement on how the gym can continue, either in its current location or elsewhere. And either myself or Councillor Sandquist or the Director of Leisure Services has said they'll be delighted to take part in those meetings and help as we can.
Thank you, Councillor Barker, and thank you,
Thank you.
Ms. Ferrara, for bringing that to our attention. Thank you. So that was the last question in this item. Can I thank those that took part and for participating tonight? It's much appreciated. If you would like to remain for the remainder of the meeting, we'll be going on probably till about 10 o'clock. You're more than welcome. Otherwise, you can leave now. Thank you. Agenda item 8, questions. There are 45 minutes for questions. Will all members wishing to ask a question please indicate now and continue doing so until your request has been noted by the Chief Executive Officer and the Monitoring Officer. Please remember that questions may be asked of a Cabinet member or a committee member. Okay, thank you for that. So I will ask members, as you know, who've indicated that they would like to ask a question after Councillor Swaddle has asked his 3 questions. Councillor Swaddle, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Can I ask a question to the Leader of the Council? I see that you've written a letter on your 10 red lines for Oxford Street pedestrianisation. And as I understand it, there is yet no official response. But informally, some of, and if not all of them, have been ruled out. Can you confirm the situation?
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. Whilst I can confirm that there has not been a formal response to the letter, discussions have been ongoing at an officer and political level, and at the moment, there has been no ruling in or out of the matters in the formal 10 questions, although obviously they have indicated obviously the issue of pedestrianisation, they are clear that they wish to pursue that, and that they have continued to stress their strong preference for the use of some form of MDA and MDC. However, they have not made any final decisions on them or any of the other 10 points, but we are making our case strongly to them and to others about the issues that we outlined in those 10 points.
Supplementary, Lord Mayor. Could you explain what you're doing to make the Mayor listen to yourself? Looking at his diary for the last period, he doesn't appear to have had a meeting with you, which would suggest that you haven't been heard directly.
I'm intrigued to know whether you're following the Mayor of London around, Councillor Swaddle. However, I have spoken to the Mayor in the immediate aftermath of the decision, and have had, we have been having, as I said, discussions at both officer and political level to make our case on behalf of the citizens of Westminster and to raise the concerns that we have about the scheme. And whilst I'm on my feet, I would like to take the opportunity to welcome two new councillors to this forum. Councillor Hook, who is the new cabinet member, the new councillor for Harrow Road, and a returning councillor for the West End in Councillor Barnes. So welcome back, Councillor Barnes.
Thank you. And I too will welcome those councillors and note that you said no to my question. Question to the Leader of the Council. Can the Leader of the Council explain why it took over 8 months to finally take action on illegal encampments on Park Lane?
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. As Councillor Swaddle is aware, the City Council has been working proactively to address the situation on Park Lane. As he knows, this is TfL-owned land, and the process was ultimately reliant on TfL moving a writ of possession through the courts. We note, obviously, the impact that Purdah was deemed to have at the early stages of this, but we believe we were making the case to move further and faster to come to a fair resolution to the situation. Obviously, I would like to pay tribute to the work of our council officers in assisting that process both before and on the day to make sure that removal took place in an orderly fashion and that those with support needs were supported, but that we were making sure that that site was returned and cleared. So recognise that it took longer than we would have liked. I hugely thank the work that all of our officers and members did to make the case for this to be speeded up, and I think there are important lessons to be learned for the future about how that can be sped up, but I think we are, the right outcome has been achieved, and I think we will want to make sure that that site is kept clear for the future.
Can the Leader assure me that it won't take 8 months next time, particularly when it involves Westminster land, which is also occupied by tents under the Westway? Or is it symptomatic of a soft approach?
As Councillor Swaddle will be aware, the areas under the Westway have seen clearances on Westminster's own land, and whilst I'm aware that there are tents remaining on TfL-related land, we continue to make that case to TfL, and we're looking to secure the sites under the Westway for the long term. Again, we will make no apology for working in a considered manner, as, in fairness, the Council has in the past, to make sure that support is given to those who need it. But we recognise that long-term encampments are not the way forward. They're not in the interest of the people who are living on the street, and they're not in the interest of our residents. So we have moved forward in terms of action on our own land, and we are, as we will be aware, making further investments in our rough sleeping service through the coming MTFP process. And in sites across the city, we are also taking action to tackle ASB that particularly surrounds some of the daytime activities in and around the streets. So that is we're having a proactive approach that balances support with tackling antisocial behaviour. And as I said, progress has been made on Westminster's own land in relation to the Westway, and we're moving forward in relation to moving forward with TfL.
Thank you. Another question to the Leader of the Council. Before the recent elections, Labour locally campaigned that the Conservatives would not fund the rebuilding of St Mary's Hospital. Now, having won the election, the Labour government have put the St Mary's Hospital build on ice. I have a petition here from over 1,000 residents on this issue. Will we see a campaign from the Council to call on the government to rebuild this vital facility?
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. I will take no lectures from the party opposite, who have systematically underfunded our NHS for decades whilst crashing the economy that has meant that we have seen huge problems. I can answer the question. This council is committed to working to make sure we get a new facility at St Mary's as soon as possible, which is why it's in the site allocations approach that we're talking about later on this evening. We have made multiple representations to the government about the importance of moving this forward. I can understand that the incoming government is having to try and sort out the unholy mess that it was left by the party opposite in terms of the 30 hospitals programme that was not hospitals and barely and not a programme. So I think the reality is we are increasing capital investment as a government, and this council will continue to make the case that St Mary's is absolutely right to move forward. And we're strong working with Imperial to put forward the case for the next stage of moving forward with the business case and on to future investment. So we're fully supportive of refurbishing and replacing St Mary's Hospital, and we are wanting to make sure... I'm not taking any lectures from you lot who absolutely made a mess of this. So we're going to keep doing that.
Councillor Hugg, I'm conscious that others want to ask questions and get answers, so can we speed it up a little bit?
I'm sorry, but the question didn't really seem to be answered to me. Is the council going to lead a campaign to have the facility rebuilt and stand up to this Labour government, or does the leader not want to upset his masters?
Yes. We will make the case for refurbishing St Mary's. You are ultimately, what did you do, Councillor Swaddle, when you were in power for so long? We have made the case to ministers. We have made the case to the NHS centrally. We are fully supportive and working hard to campaign for a future for St Mary's. You can play politics all you like, but you had the opportunity in government and you absolutely messed it up. Yeah. We, as a government, we will sort out the mess that you left and make sure that we're delivering at a local level and a national level for our residents.
Thank you. Councillor Glenn, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I've got a question from one of my residents who unfortunately was not selected to ask a question tonight. On the 22nd of October, a major pipe burst at Lillington Gardens, flooding about 5 of our residents' homes with scalding hot water and damaging the community centre. The out-of-hours contact centre told residents to wait 2 to 4 hours for help. In desperation, neighbours called the fire brigade, but they couldn't access the estate easily. It took 4 hours for a GEM operator to arrive and close the correct valve. Does the Cabinet Member for Housing think the out-of-hours contact centre is providing a good service to residents?
Thank you, Councillor Glenn. The leak in the community hall was directly linked to the PDHU and its ageing pipes. Our contractors and housing staff were at the community hall as soon as possible, and they were with the residents throughout the whole time. 3 families were decanted, 2 families are moving in this week, and 1 family has already moved back into their homes. Our surveyors have remained in touch with all residents, and work is still underway in the small hall, but otherwise the community centre is back in use. I think the question is, how soon can we do the works to the repairing of the pipes of the PDHU? Because under your administration, you did not do anything, and the PDHU is between 50 to 70 years beyond its life expectancy.
Supplementary. If it's 70 years after its life expectancy would have been 0. It's about 70 years old. But anyway, after a similar incident in Forsyth House, which made the national papers, a large amount of compensation was paid. We were assured that lessons would be learnt and better emergency procedures put in place. Given the acknowledged risk of future catastrophic leaks, what is the criteria used to assess the safety of our residents, and at what point would the estate be classified as unsafe?
That's a very good question. I'll have to look into that and get back to you.
Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Hook, question.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. My question is for the Cabinet Member for Communities, Councillor Cara Sanquist. As a recently elected councillor for Harrow Road Ward, I'd be interested to know what benefits the North Paddington programme will bring to the Harrow Road residents.
Thank you, Councillor Hook, and I'd just like to take this opportunity to welcome you to this chamber, to our group, and congratulate you on your election. I have been blown away by Councillor Hook's energy over the last couple of weeks, and I know that you will serve people of Harrow Road really well in years to come. This administration is committed to investing in the North Paddington area in recognition of the deprivation that it has historically faced. And to that end, the North Paddington programme was launched in February 2023. My colleague, Councillor Barraclough, has quoted many times the city plan, and I will quote it again. The North West Economic Development Area has long contained some of Westminster's most deprived areas, with lower levels of qualifications, earnings, health, higher levels of worklessness than elsewhere in the city. It is an area requiring coordinated intervention to tackle persistent levels of inequality. And the North Paddington programme is this effort. In Harrow Road specifically, there have been lots of things delivered already, although the programme is just getting started. We have a new and improved market at Maiden Hill and a dedicated Maiden Hill Markets officer to support new traders in the area. We have invested in improvements to the physical space to improve the market and create more activities and events in the space. We have a council presence for the first time at 2 Fernhead Road, where council officers can base themselves from and work in the community. And we have community development workers in the area. We have a dedicated activities and events manager to coordinate weekly pop-up engagement sessions and bring council services to Maiden Hill. There's been a very successful Halloween celebration, and there will be a Christmas tree lighting very soon. And we're investing in the Lidford Community Hall, a valuable community asset, which is going to be refurbished to include a new kitchen, accessible toilets, and a new roof.
Sorry, Councillor Swaddle. Councillor Sargent, can we... Yep. Supplementary?
Brilliant stuff that we're doing.
Thank you. Supplementary question is, what are the wider benefits of the community across the North Paddington area?
Brief, exactly. Yeah.
We had decades of neglect of Paddington. It's about time we caught up.
I'm very glad you asked that. In Queen's Park, in my own ward, there's been over £300,000 investment in the Avenues Youth Club to refurbish the space and ensure that it can support more young people in the area. There's been £250,000 of investment allocated to works following environmental visual audits in the Mozart estate to support physical improvements with a number of works, including covers on communal electrical sockets, clasps over fire drop keyholes, disabling of trade entry buttons, and lots of things that result from historic disrepair because of the neglect that the area has faced over decades. There's also been an investment of £2.4 million in Queen's Park Family Hub, which should be delivered soon and unfortunately wasn't delivered under the past administration. And in Westbourne, there's been investment in Woodfield Road public highways. The ward has one of the highest numbers of disabled residents, and a key focus of the works has been to improve accessibility and mobility.
Thank
we
you.
also have a communications manager who's working with the Westbourne Neighbourhood Forum to raise awareness of support for people in the area.
During the Westbourne. They just show themselves up.
Respect,
And
please.
in the Stowe Centre in Westbourne, there's the North Paddington Opportunities Project, which is a support hub serving all 3 wards, offering employment advice, CV workshops, benefit guidance, IT training, and other opportunities to support residents to thrive.
Thank you, Councillor
Well
Sargent. There was a good example of a very full answer. So please, could you please keep them shorter? Councillor Barbara Asmaninoff.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. My question is for the Cabinet Member for Public Protection. Marylebone and West End ward residents continue to be gravely concerned about various issues relating to Cavendish Square. Recently, when one resident wrote, his email was titled Cavendish Square Public Toilet. Where there are rough sleepers, unfortunately, human defecation is rife across Westminster, including around Cavendish Square. Please can you confirm that while the land is owned by Westminster City Council, Environmental Health and Parks are working to clear the area and improve the standards of hygiene, as there is much room for improvement?
Thank you for your question, Councillor Azimano. I'm aware of the issues in Cavendish Square. It has been brought to my attention. I know that our officers are working with the parks in terms of how we stop some of this, antisocial behaviour and as you say, some of the foul that is permitted, but that is done on these gardens. It is unacceptable. We are working close with officers. I will come back to you with a fuller response about how much work we're doing and how often we're doing it. So, yeah, thank you.
Follow-up question. The company their planning application expires in March 2025. The company is liaising with the council because their intention is to purchase the land and the car park rather than lease it. What assurances will the council seek that Reef have the £140 million funds to develop the site and it will not continue to decline further?
Thank you very much for your supplementary. I'm unaware of those details specifically, but I will come back to you. And I think that comes under one of my other cabinet portfolios because it's not public protection related completely, because it is about, so who would that come under? That will come under Paul and David.
Thank you.
So it will come under David Boothroyd. So I will liaise with Councillor Boothroyd.
Thank you, Councillor
But that's not supplementary to
no,
your question.
Supplementary should be directed to the Cabinet member you've originally asked the question to. Thank you. Councillor Lilly.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Residents engaging with licensing frequently get support and advice supported by the council. I'd like to ask the Cabinet member for planning and economic development, when will residents benefit from planning advice?
Thank you, Councillor. This is correct, isn't it? Planning is complicated. It's an arcane field of public policy, and normal people only get involved when someone makes a planning application next door to where they live. So as part of Fairer Westminster, we want to give residents the information they need to make representations on the planning applications that affect their lives. So we're going to be launching a community planning advice service in the new year that will focus on major applications at the start until we've got the service bedded down. The community planning service will offer guidance to enable residents to understand the planning process, planning law and policies, and the material planning considerations they need to know about when determining a planning application. This will manage expectations. We won't be drafting letters of objection or representing residents at committee hearings, at least not at the outset. But I'm hopeful the service will help our residents make their case in the most effective manner, that will help our planning service run more efficiently and help decisions quicker. And applicants will work on this too. I think it's going to be a win-win.
Well done. Thank you. Councillor Rowley. Oh, sorry, did you want supplementary?
Yes, please.
Oh, sorry. I thought you indicated you didn't.
Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Sorry.
I think members on both sides will appreciate the response of the Cabinet member for planning, because they care as much as we do that residents get heard and supported. Planning, as he says, is extremely complicated, and we've got some changes and reforms to planning happening shortly. I'd like the Councillor to unpack those in simple language.
Thanks, Councillor. Look, we're voting tonight on some changes to the Planning Committee, and I'm grateful for the chance to explain what they are, and particularly as someone you know doesn't like bureaucracy, I'm very pleased to say we are abolishing the Planning and City Development Committee. I've been going to this committee for 6 years. In that time, it's never made a recommendation or taken a decision. P&CD is a constitutional anomaly which wastes member time and officer resource while letting scrutiny off the hook. So, what are we doing? We're widening the remit of the Major Apps Committee. As well as meeting to decide planning applications, Major Apps can now meet in public to discuss planning policy. At the same time, we're reducing the number of subcommittees from 3 to 2 and equalising representation so all will have 3 majority and 2 minority members. Personally, I value the experience of planning committee members and want them to be able to contribute to policy formation. So we'll be starting a new forum for planning committee members that will meet in private and be able to talk freely and openly, not only about policy, but about how we take decisions, individual applications, and about how the committee operates. Finally, I'll be asking the scrutiny process to play an enhanced role. I expect both planning policy changes and the operation of the planning service to feature regularly on the agenda as they do at other councils. These changes will improve scrutiny, speed decision making and reduce bureaucracy. Please support them when they come to a vote.
Thank you. Councillor Rowley.
Well done. Question for the Leader of the Council. Does he believe that pay increases should be linked to performance?
I would obviously value greater clarity about the focus of his question rather than raising things in the abstract. Obviously, we want to ensure that people receive fair pay for the work that they do and that skills and talent are recognised, but I would obviously value greater understanding of what it is that is driving it.
Cabinet member pay has gone up 53.4%.
Shocking.
But if I read this document from the Audit Performance Committee, and I can bore you by going through lots of numbers, there's been serious and concerning declines in cabinet member division performance. So I'd like to know how can you justify a 53% pay rise over that period is not linked to any element of performance whatsoever. I can read the numbers out, especially given Comrade Streeting's comments today, quite correctly so, regarding NHS, that there should be no reward for failure. What we've got is reward for failure.
I do not recognise Councillor Rowley's description of the performance of our cabinet. I appreciate that he's a slightly somewhat erratic presence in committees, given what we've experienced in budget scrutiny. So I mean, he may not have been paying attention to the progress the council has been making. As has been made very clear, cabinet member allowances in this council remain lower than any other council in inner London. They remain half the level of the colleagues in Kensington and Chelsea, and I certainly do not think they are doing twice the work that our council is doing, because we are making real change here in Westminster. So I'm proud of the progress my cabinet has been making. As I said, they do so at a level far below anyone else in inner London. And we're doing a lot of good things. So, and I said, to be very clear, I appreciate that Councillor Rowley will obviously feel upset that no one ever put him in the cabinet when he was
he's never been in the cabinet.
Opportunity. But I know that people like putting my cabinet
good
certainly
enough.
up to it.
Thank you. Councillor Hassan. Councillor Hassan. Question?
I've got a question for the Cabinet Member for Finance and Council Board. Was the recent budget good news for Westminster?
Councillor Hassan for her question. Yes, the budget was excellent news for Westminster because Westminster is the key location in Britain and the budget was excellent news for Britain. By contrast with the £22 billion black hole which the government inherited from its predecessors, the budget began fixing the foundations of our economy to invest in Britain's future. The International Monetary Fund has already increased their growth forecast for the United Kingdom and approved the budget's focus on boosting growth through a needed increase in public investment while addressing urgent pressures on public services. The budget delivers funding for 2 million NHS operations, scans and appointments a year, capital funding to rebuild schools and build new social homes, the biggest increase in carers allowance eligibility since it was introduced, cuts the business rate bills for struggling retail, hospitality and leisure businesses, all while freezing income tax, VAT and employees' national insurance. This is a budget which brings back economic stability and gives British businesses the confidence to invest in the growth which will return us to prosperity after 14 disastrous wasted years. Finally, the budget includes specific measures which will directly assist this council.
Supplementary, if I may. What specific funding recently announced by the government is the council likely to benefit from? Thank you.
Yes, the Chancellor announced a significant real terms increase in the local government financial settlement, which forms the core central government grant to councils. There is also a 600 million increase in the social care grant, which is additional funding to adults and children's social care, and 233 million extra additional spending on homelessness, which will help our temporary accommodation problem. The decision on how much each individual council will get will be announced in the local government financial settlement expected in December. The budget also includes increased funding for discretionary housing payments and renews the Household Support Fund for another full year on top of the 6-month extension we've already had from this government. We have used that fund to support the most vulnerable households in the city. Welcome the decision to continue it.
Councillor Pitford.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. My question is for the Cabinet Member for Housing Services. With the press announcing costs for a replacement PDHU system at up to £66,000 per dwelling, is there a maximum figure that the Cabinet Member believes should be paid for a heating system for a flat, regardless of who is paying, be that the tenant, the leaseholder, the council or the state, i.e. the taxpayer?
I'm actually really shocked at your question because you're at our resident working group meetings and you know that the 66k that was quoted was in a slide deck that was shared with residents on the 17th of July as part of our ongoing engagement and commitment to residents. And we're always honest and transparent with residents. This figure was, I don't know why you're laughing. This figure was the highest estimate at that time for the largest property on one of the estates. The figures shared are not final at this stage, and you know as well as I do that we are going, once we've reduced the options, and we have a short list of options, we will give everyone a financial analysis of what the costs will be. And we've also made it clear that we're going to be looking at funding, external funding, as much as possible.
Yeah. Thank you. I didn't quite get an answer of how much you think is acceptable, but the supplementary is, does the Cabinet Member share my concern that ACOM, the consultants on this project, refused to run sensitivities to their financial model that were requested by an elected representative and agreed by council officers?
I have a lot of faith in ACOM. I think they're doing an excellent job. And if you've asked for, sorry, I'm really sorry, but I mean, I can't take you seriously. You asked ChatGPT what the best option for PDHU would be, and then you emailed that to our officers. It's a project that will cost millions of pounds, and we are working really closely with our leaseholders and tenants, and you're turning to ChatGPT.
Thank you.
Here, here.
And lecture me about
Councillor
housing.
Piddock.
What does he know?
Let's
Thank
talk
you.
about the mismanagement of housing for the last 50-odd years.
You had 180 million in
Thank
your
you.
budget for it.
Councillor Piddock.
Thank you, Lord
Thank
Mayor.
you.
I'd like to ask the Cabinet Member for Climate, Ecology and Culture, can you give us an update on what the Council is doing to improve access to the arts for residents and school children?
Yes, thank you very much for your question, Councillor Piddock. Thanks for your support always for culture and for our school kids here in Westminster. A key priority for me as the Cabinet Member for Culture is ensuring that the many fantastic institutions that we have in Westminster are seen as for the people who grow up here. It really frustrates me that we have huge housing estates and people in underprivileged families who live near the National Gallery, the West End theatres. They walk past them every week and they don't see it as something that's accessible for them. So there's lots we're doing as a council. You'll all be familiar with our City Lions scheme, which everyone in this chamber I know can agree does fantastic work. Yes, thank you. I'm allowed to admit when you do good things and we're allowed to continue them and make sure they're continuing to support access to culture. This year, they've given over 1,000 free tickets out to young people. Over 2,500 young people have been engaged and will continue to support City Lions programme going forward. There's lots of specific programmes for different types of kids as well, so I was really happy to attend a production by the Dreams from Afar group, which supports unaccompanied asylum seeker children that are coming in to Westminster, and it was amazing to see what they were enabled to do. But the most exciting thing that we've recently launched is our Arts Link, which is our local cultural education partnership, and that's going to do an awful lot to link our schools in with our big institutions.
Thank you. I have a supplementary which you started to answer. Could you tell us a little bit more about the Arts Link site and how we can encourage children to access it?
Yes. So the Arts Link LSEP as a concept is an Arts Council endorsed framework to help increase these local partnerships between our educational providers and our cultural institutions. And the key reason that we've established this is to create the system to aggregate the local cultural offer for our Westminster schools, who we find often struggle to build these relationships individually. So some schools have good relationships with certain institutions while others don't. So the idea behind the Arts Link is that schools can sign up to the mailing list, and please, all of you, send links out to your local schools, encourage them to get involved. They can find free offers that a lot of these institutions are putting forward. To date, and I've just double-checked this, we have 38 cultural partners on the directory. I'm looking at it now: Cartoon Museum, Donmar Warehouse, National Gallery. These are huge household names offering things for free for our schools to be able to attend. 31 schools, school offers currently on the site, which schools can already sign up to enjoy. So there is a launch event happening in December, on December the 2nd. I've emailed all of you, inviting you to come along. Many of you have already said yes, which is brilliant. So you'll be able to see there what the Arts Link's going to do and hear more about it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Barnes.
Lord Mayor, thank you very much, colleagues. It's good to be back. Unfortunately, I'm not the only thing that's back from 2018. So too is the Mayor's crackpot scheme to pedestrianise Oxford Street. And I would like to ask the Cabinet Member for Planning and Economic Development if it's possible for him to give a guarantee that the Westminster funds allocated for the Oxford Street programme that was to be under Westminster City Council's management will not be passed to the Mayor for his proposed plan in the disastrous scenario that the MDC comes forward.
I'm sorry, I've got a bit of a sore throat. It's great to have you back. The quality of questioning has already gone up 100%. So you'll no doubt add to the strength on the other side of the room. We have no intention of contributing any money from Westminster to the Mayor's scheme for Oxford Street. So no, we spend in the Oxford Street dividend somewhere else.
I'm delighted by that. Unfortunately, the Labour Mayor of London won't be, as he has already discussed in meetings, that the Westminster money will be a core part of the allocation he would make for the pedestrianisation. One of the things that he also would be the licensing to also be handed over under the MDC, not part of the legislation. Can I just ask for a similar guarantee from the Cabinet Member that there is no situation under which he would endorse licensing being moved over to the MDC?
So, just to go back on what you said at the beginning of that question, there is no indication we have that the Mayor will be asking for any money from Westminster Council. We've met the officers and the political appointees. I don't think you have. If you have any information that we don't have, please drop it in an email. I'll be very interested to find out.
Thank you, Councillor Barnes. Thank
Showed
you.
it where, sorry?
Just now.
That's kind of hearsay. We need to do a bit better than that, please. Right. As for licensing, no, we want to retain licensing in Westminster and planning too, as you could probably imagine.
Thank you. Councillor Chowdhury.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. My question is to Cabinet Member of City Management and Air Quality. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me?
Yeah, just continue. Yeah, it's on.
All right.
It's not great, but it's on.
My question is to Cabinet Member of City Management and Air Quality. Please, can you update the Council on the Walking Fright initiative with Amazon?
Thank you, Councillor Chowdhury. We're working with Amazon at the moment to come up with a 3-month pilot to test out walking freight in Soho and the West End during the peak delivery time to support greener and more sustainable deliveries. Amazon's vans will be allowed to park on single yellow lines in 2 designated locations in Soho, from where the Amazon drivers will deliver parcels on foot using wheeled cages. And we hope that there'll be 3 real benefits from this. Firstly, to significantly reduce the number of light goods vehicle movements in the highly congested streets of Soho and the West End, while continuing to meet the Amazon customers' needs. Secondly, to ease curbside stress, where there are competing uses for scarce amounts of curb space. And third, very important, to reduce harmful emissions and collision risk. The trial started on the 24th of October and will end the end of January, and I'm confident that it will increase the number of parcels that are delivered on foot and not by motor vehicle.
If this initiative is successful, will it be rolled out elsewhere?
Councillor Chowdhury, I'm sure that if it's a success, that we will be discussing this further with Amazon in other parts of the city, and I hope that other of the delivery companies that are used to deliver online purchases will also consider this way, because it's clearly the way forward to reduce the number of deliveries while not interfering with the number of online purchases that people make.
Councillor Mendoza.
My question is to the lead member for Finance. Now, Councillor Hassan has kindly paved the way for this with the rather unfortunately stilted and wilted exchange with Councillor Boothroyd, who really should take lessons from Councillor de Moldenberg about how to deliver prepared lines in this regard. But he spoke about the budget. We know he's now happy with the budget. He likes the tax and spend approach. That's fine from his perspective. I would like to know, though, before the budget, did he or the administration make any representations on behalf of this council to the Chancellor? And if so, what areas were those in, and could he share just the detail of that?
Thank Councillor Mendoza for the question. I enjoyed a full meeting with the Chancellor before she took up office when we went round canvassing together. I think Westminster Council has made its It's not declarable. It's not declarable. It's routine electioneering. But we remain. I think Westminster has been quite clear on what its lobbying asks are of government, and they apply to all government departments.
Supplementary. Well, we know that the leader has a tangential relationship with the mayor, and you have a tangential relationship with the Chancellor, which is somewhat good news. We heard last night at the Budget Scrutiny Group that there are some concerns among officers that the formula might change for the allocation of additional spending. Are you planning on making representations, now that we know the broad amount, to try and get a better outcome for Westminster than officers are assuming is happening? And if so, how do you propose to sell that into the Chancellor? What lines are you going to use?
I thank Councillor Mendoza for his question. As it happens, I used to work for the Chancellor's predecessor in her constituency, so I do have a connection there, and she is from my the beautiful city of Leeds, which is excellent. Councillor Mendoza may be aware that when the local government financial settlement is announced in December, normally in the last week of December before Christmas, that is as a consultation. And local authorities are therefore invited to comment on their allocations through it, and we have been commenting. Now, in previous years, I have often made the point, Councillor Mendoza may have been, I'm not sure if he was here for them, that this is like Charlie Brown, that it's always Lucy holding the football, telling Charlie Brown as he runs up that she's going to hold it there, only to whip it away at the last moment, and then Charlie Brown goes and ends up in flying through the air and hurting himself. Well, it's not Lucy anymore, it's Rachel. I'm sure she will be listening to Westminster with a great deal more interest, and we will make sure we put our case for a fair funding review that delivers for this council.
Hear, hear.
Councillor Eagleton.
Thank you. I have a question for Councillor Mathska-Butler-Falasis, which is, can she give an update on how the recent inspection by the Care Quality Commission went?
Thank you very much. I'm very pleased with the results of the CQC inspection. We got a good result. Also, the rating that we had was 75%, which is currently the second nationally and the highest in London. I want to express huge... Thank you, but I'm going to ask you to do this again. I want to express huge thanks to Bernie Flaherty and the team for their hugely hard work that they have done. And I've also asked them to promise me that now that the RBKC inspection has started, that they only go up to 74%, so that we still remain the highest scoring council in London. That would be great. Thank you very much.
Supplementary, if I may. Thank you, that's great news. And for the benefit of the full council, could you also perhaps explain what impact, if any, the recent pay rise for care workers had on the inspection outcome?
Thank you. I was very pleased that the CQC mentioned specifically the pay rise for home care workers as one of the initiatives that we have done to reduce the inequalities faced by our home care workers, who are often from global majority backgrounds. They are often women, and it's hugely important to improve the pay of this work. Also to say that we have received feedback from the agencies about the effect that the £1.50 has had on their services. They have mentioned a huge drop in complaints and also a huge increase in decrease in the turnaround of staff. So when you have a drop in turnaround of staff, then that means that the quality of care improves, which is why we're having fewer complaints. So it's good news all round.
Thank you. I'm going to try and squeeze in one more question. Councillor Short. Very quick, please.
For the Cabinet Member of City Management and Air Quality, what are the aims of consultations on transport schemes and who should be consulted?
I know where this is going. The aim of consultation on transport projects is to get the views of local residents, local businesses, people travelling through the area, so that informs the decision making.
So if there is a consultation and the response comes back as a resounding no, what do you think should happen? Do you think a further look should be made and more outreach put forward, or do you think it, sorry, I can't read my writing, or do you think we should push ahead and just say people haven't understood what was happening?
Yes, I think that there have been a number of consultations on the Warwick Way Public Realm Scheme, which I'm sure you're referring to. The initial ones were very, very much in favour of the support, around the 70% plus. And then we had a further consultation, which I think was hijacked, if I'm being absolutely honest, hijacked by one organisation which sent out emails to thousands of people, something I think which is being looked at by the NHS, in terms of their information commissioner. I think that's a very serious potential misuse of NHS information, personal information, and so I am inclined to take little notice of that hijacked part of that consultation. I would rather go both with the initial very strong support from local residents for the Warwick Way scheme, which has been endorsed by the 3 Pimlico North councillors on every occasion which I have engaged with them on that. I hope that's helpful.
Thank you. This ends the time allocated for questions. I'd made a quick note. Apart from Councillor Swaddle, we managed to get 13 councillors to ask questions. I think we could probably do better than that next time. So questions need to be short and the answers need to be succinct.
Institutional memory
Thank
is
you.
very short too, please.
Okay, agenda item 9, councillor issue. I call on Councillor Hannah Galley to speak on her chosen topic, safety in Abbey Road ward, including ASB and policing.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I would like to
start my maiden speech by saying thank you to my wonderful predecessor and friend, Amanda Langford. She made a hugely positive impact on Abbey Road, bringing together local groups and residents. She was exceptional on the doorstep, often stopping by for a coffee with people she met. Amanda is exactly the kind of person you want in politics. She loves and cares about people. Abbey Road is one of the most delightful areas of London to represent and live in. I'm not a Londoner by birth. In fact, I grew up in a small town in the northwest of England, sandwiched between North Yorkshire and Cumbria. But I moved to London over a decade ago and soon fell in love with St John's Wood. You might assume the northwest and the northwest of London have little in common, but in the 3 years I've spent living here, I've discovered that both places have the strongest possible sense of community. Those local to Abbey Road are fiercely protective of its place and character. I only had to visit the St John's Wood Festival in the summer to see all of this come together. And Abbey Road is an area steeped in history, from the Lord's Cricket Ground to the world-famous recording studios. Over 50 years after the Beatles released their Abbey Road record, fans still flock to the crossing to emulate the most famous band in history every hour of the day. I tried in vain to find another zebra crossing that is Grade 2 listed, but it appears that ours is unique. So while our sense of community in Abbey Road might be stronger than ever, it's not halted a wave of crime and antisocial behaviour on our streets. And I'm afraid to say the impact this is having on our community is huge. I've been alarmed by the rise in muggings and phone thefts on our streets, and have been the victim of this myself twice in recent years. Jogging around the perimeter of Regent's Park, I was grabbed by masked men on a moped, trying to wrestle my phone out of my hand. They didn't stand a chance against my extremely loud screams, but the next time I was not so lucky. My phone was cleanly whipped out of my hand outside Camden Tube. For a long time, this city has not felt safe. In my ward, children in particular are becoming a target for phone theft. Residents have described how gangs will travel to the area to intercept kids as they leave school, either to walk home or take the tube. Alarmingly, this sometimes happens at knife point, in what are clearly premeditated acts. Since I took office in July, I've been helping residents and shopkeepers on Blenheim Terrace. This quiet, lovely street has unfortunately become the target of a sustained crime wave. Brazen shoplifters have repeatedly targeted a small family-owned corner shop. Scooters have been performing reconnaissance on the street, making use of a small passageway. And on Saturday, an absolutely vile anti-Semitic incident took place in broad daylight. Elsewhere, quiet residential streets are plagued by drugs. Residents are greeted by the sight of people visibly taking and selling cannabis outside their homes. In Scott Ellis Gardens, teenagers are disgracefully climbing onto the roof of the building to throw illicit parties. Those residents with young children are rightly scared and intimidated. Despite the best efforts of our local policing team, in residential streets up and down Abbey Road, people are now taking policing into their own hands, paying out of their own pocket for security patrols. Now, I do welcome the Council's investment in CCTV cameras, and we're in the process of deploying a number of these across our ward. However, my colleagues and I have discovered that there are very few locations where they can actually be situated. Smaller lampposts on residential streets will not support them, nor can we attach them to TfL-owned streetlights, eliminating many locations on Finchley Road. For smaller streets like Blenheim Terrace, with quiet, secluded corners, this is not going to solve their problems. I also want to raise what support and training is being given to our local policing teams to help access the footage from these cameras. In conversations I've had, it seems that while Charing Cross can access footage if a crime has been reported, our local team don't currently have the means of monitoring the cameras. The bottom line is that the Mayor of London has not got a grip on policing in this city. Ensuring our communities are safe is non-negotiable. It's the very least our residents deserve, and under this Labour Council and a Labour Mayor, it has continued to decline. In short, we need more neighbourhood policing. We need CCTV cameras fitted not just to our main roads, but to smaller side streets to ensure that residents and businesses feel safe. And we need to know that the police can access and monitor this footage. This is what the residents of Abbey Road need, and it's why I am here to champion them. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Galley, on your maiden speech. Can I call on Councillor Aisha Less to respond? Thank you.
I would like to start by thanking Councillor Galley for bringing this important issue to full council tonight and by congratulating her on her maiden speech. As you know, the council works closely with the police to tackle crime and antisocial behaviour. In Abbey Road, the local policing team is fully staffed with 1 sergeant, 2 PCs and a PCSO. And although abstractions do happen, the Met have assured us that they work to keep these to a minimum. The police have 2 Nomad CCTV cameras as part of the St John's Wood High Street scheme, and we are working closely with ward councillors as well as residents and local community to place the council's own CCTV network as part of our rollout of 100 cameras. Following consultation with ward councillors, proposals for the placement of new CCTV cameras have been discussed at neighbourhood coordination meetings and submitted to the CCTV team. Like all wards, Abbey Road has a dedicated email inbox for ward councillors that they can contact at any time. Councillor Galley can also speak to her neighbourhood team leader and coordinator if she wishes to raise any other issues. And of course, I'm always happy for ward councillors to raise issues with me directly. On the Scott Ellis Gardens issue, this has been raised and specific concerns around the ASB in those 2 areas, so Scott Ellis Gardens and Boundary Road Estate. Street briefings were arranged to give local communities the opportunity to engage with officers and discuss their concerns. Officers directed people affected on how to report criminal activity. The neighbourhood coordinator has requested CCTV as part of the evidence gathering and is working with police to target alleged antisocial behaviour and crime. They will ensure any incidents are investigated and addressed swiftly. You also mentioned the suitability of current furniture that we have on some of those streets that you mentioned, and actually some of them are unsuitable. We are exploring other ways that we bringing cameras to areas by buying furniture and putting them in those some of those areas that are unsuitable for the existing furniture. So we will come back to you on some of those options, and like quite rightly, the areas that you said in your speech are a concern to us as well, and we need to sort this out. Lord Mayor, members will know that tackling crime and antisocial behaviour is a priority for our administration. ASB can blight people's lives. That's why we reversed the previous administration's decision to sell off our CCTV and brought our monitoring service back in-house. We're rolling out 100 deployable cameras with 3/4 operational by Christmas, and we're working with all ward councillors, residents and businesses to decide on where these cameras should be placed. The feed will be monitored, and our teams will work closely with the police to reduce crime and identify frequent offenders. As we've already seen successes with the new cameras, we'll be looking to expand our CCTV service in 2025. The council has its own enforcement team, the city inspectors, who work in every ward across the borough to address ASB and enforcement issues. They're clamping down on illegal fly tipping, issuing 4,221 fixed penalty waste notices in the first half of this year, an increase of 200% on the same period last year. And we will prosecute people who don't comply with the law. The city inspectors have taken more than 50 cases to court this year for offences like unlicensed street trading and providing late-night refreshments without a licence. These are activities that can really impact people visiting Westminster who expect to be able to enjoy themselves safely. Lord Mayor, in Abbey Road and across the borough, we're working closely with the police and investing in resources to tackle crime and antisocial behaviour. We're determined to make Westminster a safer borough for people to live in and visit. Thank you, Lord Mayor. And thank you for your issue. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes this item. We now move on to the remaining agenda items, party business and reports for full council. The topics selected for debate and the names of those down to speak were tabled on the order paper sent to all earlier this week. Each speaker, as normal, has up to 5 minutes. Agenda item 10, party business. The majority group have selected the topic, a debate on the city plan, partial review, which will be submitted to the Secretary of State shortly, as their business this evening. This is as set out in the order paper. I would now call on Councillor Barraclough to open the debate.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'm delighted to be opening this debate on the partial review of the city plan. The plan's a vital document. It's the council's main route to delivering economic growth in our city. It's also our opportunity to ensure that growth is clean, green, and provides our residents with good quality housing and employers with the space they need to provide good jobs. Here are the main changes. We're going to modify the affordable housing policy to promote flat social rent. We're going to add a new policy, retrofit first, to encourage building owners to bring forward refurbishment projects more quickly to meet the current high tenant demand. And finally, we're going to add 4 new policies to promote growth at specific locations. Grosvenor Sidings by the river at Pimlico, St Mary's Hospital, Westbourne Park Bus Garage, and some land by Royal Oak Station. Each of these site allocations will help accelerate high-quality development at those locations. There's lots to talk about, but I'm going to focus on retrofit. As we look out from City Hall, we see thousands of buildings with excellent structural standards, but with the energy performance of yesterday. Our buildings urgently need heat pumps, modern insulation, new windows, green roofs, and so on. The good news is there's strong commercial demand for upgraded buildings. Commercial tenants in Westminster will pay a high rent for a high specification accommodation. The amount of voluntary EPC certificates is a good proxy for retrofits, and it's risen consistently over the last 3 years, from 37,000 to 52,000 to 92,000 square metres of commercial floor space upgraded last year. That's more than Camden and more than the city. It proves the demand for a rapid upgrade of our commercial buildings. Good for the environment, good for jobs, and supported by business. Now, we want to ensure the council is helping speed up project pipelines and not slow them down. And the reason we need a new retrofit policy is because our current one is unclear. It says that demolition must be, quote, fully supported by a whole life carbon assessment, unquote, without any supporting text explaining what fully justified means. We want everyone in the development community to know where they stand as early in the process as possible. Clarity and consistency in our policy making will accelerate investment, bringing more upgraded floor space and happier tenants paying more rent and hiring more staff. But this is complicated, we know. We're the first council bringing forward such a policy, and we knew it would take time to get it right, and therefore we've undertaken extensive consultation. We began with a broad engagement in October 2022, asking for views about how a retrofit policy might work. We drafted some wording in summer 23 and tested this with our key stakeholders. We took on board their views and published revised wording in a formal consultation in March 24. This stimulated quite a few comments from the real estate industry, including 114 pages from the Westminster Property Association in response. We were challenged on a number of issues, notably on whether our proposed embodied carbon targets were so high as to be unachievable. We have listened. We have listened. Officers have rewritten the policy and prepared a separate retrofit first guidance document to be read alongside. This is going to provide certainty on how the policy will be implemented and will likely become an SPD once the retrofit first policy itself is adopted. So, what are we proposing? Well, to encourage retrofit and reuse of existing buildings, we're going to ask planning officers to balance heritage and sustainability for the first time. Specifically, we're going to be more supportive of upwards extensions to existing buildings where that unlocks full refurbishment. But although our policy is retrofit first, we won't be banning all demolition. That would be silly. Applicants proposing to redevelop a site will need to pass one of 4 tests. In future, demolition will be supported either if the current building simply can't be retrofitted, or the new use is highly specialised and requires access requirements that can't be delivered by a retrofit. If redevelopment is better in whole life carbon terms than retention, unlikely, but we need to put that in just in case. Or finally, if redevelopment delivers significant public benefit beyond that required by the city plan. Affordable housing will clearly be one of those, but we're going to allow applicants to make an economic case as well. If one of the 4 tests is passed, we're going to have a carbon budget for the construction of the new building. And we've reset the budget in response to consultation at a level that's going to be stretching but achievable. If a proposal exceeds the carbon budget, we're going to charge a carbon offset levy, which will go to pay for decarbonisation projects elsewhere in the city. Lord Mayor, Retrofit First will deliver more buildings refurbished more quickly, delivering more jobs and more growth, but less greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. Thank you.
Well done.
Thank you, Councillor Barraclough. Councillor Noble.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'd like to speak this evening about the important changes being proposed to the provision of affordable housing in new policy 13 of the new policy 13 of the partial city plan review that will ensure that social housing is rightfully reprioritised as the preeminent tenure of truly affordable housing in the city. By ensuring that 70% is set as the benchmark for social housing and the affordable proportion developers will be contributing more towards generally secure tenancies in major developments. By extending the obligation to provide affordable on smaller sites, we widen the net so that boutique schemes must also play their part towards tackling the housing crisis that we all face. Finally, making a requirement that all affordable provision for public sector land schemes is delivered in borough ensures that our residents benefit the most from the development taking place here. All these changes have already been viability tested to make sure that developers will continue to be able to build in Westminster. Now, why is it important to refocus on social housing in non-council development? Because that's where the need is most acute. It means getting families out of temporary accommodation, which benefits them and the council. It means getting people out of overcrowded private sector housing and into a home where they can live rather than just exist. It means the people who keep the City of Westminster running, the bus drivers, the care workers, the hospitality workers, as well as teachers, nurses and firefighters, can call Westminster home without worrying if they'll still be here in 6 months' time. They are all our key workers. Social housing can be the bedrock of our communities. It helps them flourish by providing the kind of stability that can only otherwise be reached where people are fortunate enough to be able to buy a home. Something nowadays which is out of reach even to well-off individuals and families. It allows employers to recruit, train and retain talent, knowing that people are less likely to have to move away because of economic circumstances. It means that we can have more sustainable housing, those built or retrofit to the specifications necessary for decades to come, reducing both their carbon footprint and energy bills. I and many here see firsthand at ward surgeries and on home visits just how crucial it is to have a safe, secure and sustainable place to call home, and I'm very pleased that we're beginning the journey towards making these changes in the city plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Noble. Councillor Glenn.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Given the Mayor of London is currently in the process of renewing the London Plan, and the government is proposing massive changes to the national planning and policy framework, it does beg the question, why now, rather than wait until the wider context is clear? This is especially true given the huge uncertainty over the future of planning in the entire Oxford Street district, thanks to their friend Mayor Khan and the central government. The site allocations are uncontroversial and identify sensible, if in some cases extremely ambitious, locations. The most sensitive of these has got to be St Mary's Hospital, long identified as needing a large capital investment. So it was very disappointing to see that their aforementioned friends in central government have not specifically committed to this in the autumn budget. The Chief Executive of Imperial College Healthcare Trust, Professor Tim Orchard, responded to that budget saying that whilst there were some positive signs for the future of hospital redevelopments, the lack of detail meant they were still frustratingly waiting for the promised release of funds to move to REBA Stage 2 at the crumbling St Mary's estate, with the delay costing them an eye-watering additional £63 to £73 million every 6 months. Councillor Shearer will cover the proposed affordable housing policy in more detail, so I'll limit my comments just to the most egregious aspects. You'll risk Westminster not being a truly mixed borough, but rather only for the very few who do qualify for social housing, or the very few rich enough to afford full market rent or buy in Westminster. You could say that this is a housing policy for the few, not the many. The proposed change to a retrofit-first policy is potentially very sensible, given the acknowledged climate crisis, but we must be very careful not to effectively ban development. I was pleased to hear what you said about listening to the WPA response. But we are massively increasing the cost, complexity and uncertainty of regulation. The detail must be right, and there must be pragmatic flexibility in the system. As I said at the beginning, these proposals are in the context of major planning policy changes at all levels. And yet, this council, as Councillor Barraclough said in his earlier answer to a question, is proposing to abolish the Planning and City Development Committee later this evening. I cannot agree with the suggestion put forward that the Planning and City Development Committee lacks purpose. It has a very specific purpose, laid out in the Council's constitution, which includes considering local plan policies and supplementary planning documents at appropriate stages of the process, both in their preparation and adoption. This has simply not happened, either with the policy changes proposed in this debate, or with the proposed Public Realm SPD, or the proposed Environment SPD. This is not the fault of the committee. Policies have not been brought forward to it at the appropriate early stage, which could have been done in private session if it was considered necessary. By vastly reducing the size of the committee and introducing a planning forum that meets in private instead, this is a real reduction in oversight and transparency of planning in this council, which I hope members across all parties can agree is a wrong turn, and they will perhaps join us in abstaining later this evening.
Thank you, Councillor Glenn. Councillor Hugg.
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. I'm delighted to have the opportunity to endorse the tireless work that's been undertaken over the last 2 years by Councillor Barraclough to make this city plan fit to face the challenges of Westminster today. In answer to Councillor Glenn's point, the challenge with changing city plans is that they take a long time, and the new MPPF changes have specifically taken on board the fact when you've got to Reg 19, you're able to move forward, and we believe that what we're doing here is in line with the government's direction of travel. At a time when too many on both sides of the Atlantic are abandoning their commitments to rise to the challenge of climate change, it is vital that Westminster steps up and does its part to creatively unlock faster-paced growth whilst addressing the issue of embodied carbon head-on. I've been heartened to hear from many of our key business partners in the city who see this approach as a way forward to modernise their portfolios whilst meeting their commitments to the Sustainable City Charter. In a space-constrained city, we're not overburdened with easily developable brownfield sites. So I want to commend the work that's been done on site allocations at Grosvenor Sidings, Royal Oak, Westbourne Park, Bus Garage and St Mary's. All these sites have been long talked about for future development but never brought forward. By taking this step, it gives the Council more of a say in the future of these areas and move forward discussions and agreements with TfL, Network at Grail and other landowners that give certainty to encourage the investment needed to deliver the homes and commercial spaces we need for our city to thrive. Scarcity of available land that we have here in Westminster is one of the main reasons why the Conservatives' track record of letting developers get away with building hardly any affordable housing was so egregious. For example, the old War Office should have had 98 affordable homes under the Council's policies at the time. It doesn't have any. They only provided £10 million out of the £40 million payment in lieu that they would have been due. Similarly, we all remember that the £1 billion scheme that turned Whiteleys into the Whiteley got away with only a 5% affordable contribution against a policy-compliant level of 35%. I could go on again and again about the missed opportunities that that party had to change the people's lives in our city. There are hundreds of families who should have been housed and you dropped the ball. And while the market absorbs the glut of super-prime property that was waved through without that affordable housing over the previous decade and responds to post-pandemic desires to consolidate out-of-town offices into Grade A facilities here in the impeccably environmentally credentialed new builds that we're going to be building in Westminster, we want to make sure that we have the policies in place to maximise contributions for affordable housing when they come forward in future. And I'm delighted that we're seeking to ensure that smaller sites contribute to the city's affordable housing needs in a measured and proportionate way that will ensure that future super prime developments of, say, 9 units, which will potentially come in at many tens, if not hundreds of millions of pounds, are paying their fair share towards housing that ordinary people can afford to live in Westminster. At the council election, we committed to reversing the previous administration's decision to weaken the requirements on developers in their affordable housing contributions to provide the most affordable type of housing of all, social housing. But we wanted to check that we were on the right track here and ensure that our principles were aligned with the evidence. So the council commissioned rigorous and independent housing needs analysis that starkly set out the challenge ahead of us to meet local housing need, given that poor track record in the past. They were clear that to truly meet local housing need based on local demographics and the pressures, not only do we need to significantly increase the number of affordable homes dramatically, we need to build to 15,000 more by 2040 to truly meet demand. We recognise that that's even challenging for our ambitions, but crucially, that the vast majority of those new build homes needed to be for social rent. So with a housing waiting list of over 4,000, growing temporary accommodation pressures, and a lamentable record of affordable house building in Westminster over decades, it's right that the revisions to the city plan changes the ratio of social and intermediate from the 40 to 60% in the previous city plan to the 70-30 split being put forward today, requiring schemes built on public land to deliver all their affordable housing in Westminster to better meet the needs of our city. These changes sit alongside work done through our affordable housing SPD to ensure that the intermediate homes built in the future are actually affordable, and something that was distinctly hit and miss in previous years. And we're working actively with the private sector to bring forward opportunities for new build, like build to rent, to help provide other forms of affordable rent in this borough. There is a housing crisis in this country, not properly addressed for generations, but which has spiralled out of control in the last 14 years. So it's only right that we use every lever available to us to maximise delivery of social and truly affordable housing here in Westminster.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Hugg. Councillor Shearer.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Today we debate the proposed revisions to the current city plan, which was only introduced actually as recently as 2021. A recent plan that aligned with the Conservative City for All mission. Off the back of an anti-development campaigning message in 22 promising no drinks for developers, which didn't last very long, it's no surprise that we see such a negative and ideological set of revisions in front of us today from the Labour group. The first ideology that prevails is a bid to change the affordable split from 60% key worker to 40% key worker and 40% social rented to a new 70% social rented and 30% key worker provision. The housing needs analysis conducted by the Conservative administration in 2019 showed very clearly that Westminster was materially underserved in key worker homes. It estimated that 563 new affordable homes needed to be built in Westminster each year to meet demand, of which 56% needed to be for intermediate housing and 44% for social housing. I find it quite astonishing that only a few months after coming to power, the Labour Party was already discussing a reversal of this split and suggesting 70-30 in favour of social rented homes. What research was this based on? Why was the previous and recent research ignored? If you don't believe me, let me refer to the Labour administration's annual affordable housing statement published in December 22. It concluded that the average turnover of social homes is at least 6 times higher than that for intermediate homes. What this means is that our key workers need to wait 6 times longer for an opportunity to live in our city. 6 times longer for teachers, firemen, nurses, policemen and women, junior doctors and our own civil servants and officers to get a home in our city. What have they done to be made a minority? The Labour Party talks about working people, or they try to. Are these working people? In my mind, they're not just workers, they are key workers, the lifeblood of our communities and the glue that holds it together. Why shouldn't they at least have equal opportunities to have a house, a home in Westminster? Is that not fair? The second ideology is the plans to retrofit first, or as the industry now refers to it as retrofit only. The most successful cities are constantly moving. They're evolving, especially the ambitious ones. They need to embrace the opportunities, new designs, state-of-the-art M&E, meet modern occupational demands, and embrace new ways of doing things. Today, the revisions of the city plan are totally lacking ambition, and they are backward-looking. It is retrospective. The plan will make building new buildings harder for everyone. Do we want new buildings? Do we want new housing for our residents? Do we want state-of-the-art building technology? Do we want to take Westminster forward on this global stage? Do we want the benefits like Section 106 and SIL and the employment that goes with that? Today we're debating an approach which will be consigned to the history books as the day Westminster's building ambitions was cut off at the knees, frozen in time. The time when the rest of the world was innovating and Westminster was being forced to shoehorn substandard building plans into outdated and unwanted buildings, many of which will be end of life in the next 50 years anyway. Building and development isn't easy. Just ask the Labour Party. They haven't brought forward a single meaningful residential scheme of any note that wasn't in the pipeline under the Conservatives. It is a process fraught with risk and where known knowns are critical. It certainly isn't a space where ideologies can govern and where improvements are made from making a process harder. No one in this chamber is debating the importance of reducing carbon emissions, nor saying that the building industry shouldn't be doing everything in its power to comply. But the real debate is how far you take that and to what end and in what context. The question must be whether a new building will bring more to our city and whether its technology will provide longer-term carbon savings compared to a retrofit over its entire lifetime. The tail must not wag the dog. Future generations will judge this council on this city plan. They will wonder what happened in 24 and why the best new green buildings moved elsewhere, to Camden, Islington, the city and other neighbouring boroughs. And if they're a key worker, their children will be wondering what their parents did to be pushed to the back of the queue. With revisions being proposed like these tonight, no wonder the Mayor feels he needs to take control over huge swathes of our city centre. Maybe, just maybe, he might have a little more pragmatism and ambition. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Shearer. I now call... Hang on, please. I now call on Councillor Barraclough to reply. The floor is yours.
No. Okay. Thank you. That was a short. That was a shorter debate than I was expecting. So, thank you, everybody who took part. That was the first debate on the city plan that we've had since I was elected. That was the first debate on the city plan I've had since I was elected in 2018. When the full plan went through, it was not debated in this chamber. It was not debated at scrutiny. Yeah. It was not even discussed at the Planning and City Development Committee. No. So I'm delighted to bring that here tonight because I think we should talk about important stuff here. That's why I brought this. It's why I brought Westminster After Dark too. I forgot at the beginning to thank Agnieszka Zimka and Head of Planning Policy and the rest of her team who've done a shed load of work on this. It's an extraordinary amount of effort that's gone into producing this. And I'm just realising that the party opposite probably haven't read the documents. They appeared on the planning website last Friday. Had you read those, you'd have read what the policy actually is, Councillor Shearer, rather than what it used to be or what you thought it might be. You also could have read the new housing needs assessment, which explains that we have 11,500 households in Westminster living in unsuitable housing, unable to afford their own. And to my mind, those are the priority. And we learnt during COVID who are the key workers. It's a lot of people. Folks who work at Tesco's are key workers just as much as junior doctors are. And if the Conservatives had been serious about intermediate rent, they might have built some at New Scotland Yard. 268 flats there. Great place for intermediate rent flats, that is. We got 10. So, you know, when you had the chance, you didn't do it. The retrofit policy has been produced in conjunction with the industry. We have listened, and the key sticking point was around the carbon budget per square metre of new accommodation. And I think the new figures will land well with the industry, and the framework will land well as well and give consistency and clarity that people need to invest and take decisions. And afterwards, maybe Councillor Shearer and Councillor Dane can get together and work out whether they like retrofit or not. I think we need a consistent voice coming from the other side. Do not believe the propaganda you get from the WPA, by the way. And let me give you an example of that from WPA propaganda. Would you like to hear some propaganda? The WPA press release on their report into all this stuff said there was going to be a catastrophic decline in employment space in the city. A catastrophic decline. Well, when you read the report they commissioned from Arup said the worst possible thing that was going to happen was a marginal decline in high-value office jobs, which they turned into a catastrophic decline for their press release. Look, we know where the WPA are headed. They're driven by some of their loudest members. A lot of their members don't agree with where they go and are more on our side of this argument. And one thing to add on affordable housing and the small sites, we were cautious about extending the obligation to small sites. So it's 35% for large sites, and it's going to be 20% for small sites. So we did listen, and we've reduced the obligation there. The change from intermediate into social won't affect the viability of residential schemes either. It'll result in a revenue decline of maybe 1% in prime areas and 3% in subprime. 10 flats out of 100 will flip tenure, and that's the impact on the revenue of the scheme. So I'm quite confident about that. And I'm very pleased that everyone likes the site allocations, because we'd never done that before in Westminster, and that's a terrific opportunity we have of accelerating development, intensifying usage, and getting more jobs more quickly and more flats more quickly than otherwise. So thank you very much, and thank you for taking part in the debate. Much appreciated.
Thank you, Councillor Barraclough. That concludes the debate on the issue and the item chosen by the majority party. So moving to the opposition group, they've selected the topic, the effects of homelessness in Westminster and how to improve the situation for all, for their debate and their business this evening. And that is set out in the order paper. So I now call on Councillor Harvey to open the debate.
Hear, hear. Thank you, Lord Mayor. As councillors, so much of what we do is to look after the needs of residents whose life is precarious. Homelessness is precarious every minute, every second. There are also members here, I know, on both sides of the political divide who have experienced homelessness. It is absolutely right that we debate the new strategy for homelessness and rough sleeping. We need it to be the best it can be. I pose three challenges. First of all, the apparent rolling together of the strategies for rough sleeping and homelessness. Secondly, I question a possible reluctance in the majority party to face up to the need for firm enforcement from time to time, not just to protect residents, but to protect vulnerable people. Thirdly, I want to reaffirm the importance of consulting and working with our residents. Lord Mayor, there are many matters for agreement as well, and I particularly want to praise involving homeless people in designing the strategy, and also the recognition of the trauma that affects so many people on the streets. And we all recognise that temporary accommodation is a crisis in almost every authority in London and beyond. But let me turn to rough sleeping. When visitors come to London, after their hotel, the first thing they often see is a street sleeper. 752 in Q1 of this year. It does pernicious damage to its victims and is a threat to the wider community. Its impact is far beyond border homelessness. It is distinct. The support it needs reaches far across the council to many more services, to charities, to NHS as well, and we should recognise that distinctiveness. Life expectancy on the streets is about 44. Extremely high rates of violence are chaos. And 40% to 3/4 of rough sleepers have severe mental health issues or histories. Each of them is someone's child or sometimes someone's parent. They deserve specific focused support to be stable and happy again if they can. We need to know there's going to be a separate strategic plan and a separate accountability. Let me turn to community protection. Except in cases involving violence or abuse in homelessness, what sets the street population apart is that need for enforcement to protect. The challenges for rough sleepers and residents near them are immense. Recently, 2 drug criminals returned to my area. Just 2 people have brought chaos. They brought fear, more drugs and drug dealing. They have now been taken off, but it's taken time. Tough love is part of what homeless people and street people need. So do our residents, businesses, workers and visitors. In South Westminster, the enforcement model has failed, and a range of agencies tell us that outside the council. People don't believe the council is on their side. Last year, residents in Vincent Square and beyond were promised a new strategy. It's never happened. And the police force in our area is about the size of a rural village police force. Please, the priority of intervening to stop dangerous behaviour needs to be restored. That leads me to my third concern. There are lots of great words about inclusion and consultation in the draft strategy, which I agree with. But it isn't happening, and trust is wearing very thin among residents who feel partnership has been lacking. When dealers and drug dealers and rough sleepers tailgate old people into their flats and elderly residents are extremely frightened, you understand why strident responses start, why trust breaks down. So please don't just talk about joint ownership and a joint structure, actually do it and do it quickly. Set up a Westminster Streets Board or something like that. Involve the charities, the council and the residents. Many of them have money and ideas and are willing to help and contribute, but most of all, talk to them. I've had a report this evening of a very serious incident in my area involving a young person, and we just need that enforcement commitment right across the council for it to stop. And the metrics need to be shared and real, and residents need to be involved. Lord Mayor, in concluding, I want to praise the work of officers in this field that has gone on for years, effectively, committed and dedicated. But I worry the scale of the problem, which I think that the strategy at times is just overwarm and brushes over, is such that even they may be overwhelmed. We need to be ensured that this strategy is all it needs to be, need to face up to its deficiencies as well as praise its strengths. And it's not that we're here to knock it down. We want it to be the best it can be. It matters to us all, Lord Mayor, that's our duty. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Harvey. Councillor Short.
Thank you, my Lord Mayor, and thank you, my colleague, Councillor Harvey. I'm continuing on from him. I think we let those on the streets down by giving them one label, homeless. I've learnt that the problems of those who are sitting or sleeping on our streets is more complex than just being homeless. Homelessness is often hidden, the single mother and child in a hotel, the family sofa surfing with relatives. I could go on, there are lots more examples. Those sleeping and sitting on our streets may be homeless, but the sad thing is they may not be, and labelling them as that undermines the problems that they are going through. I've been out with our outreach team, St Mungo's. I've also slept rough once with an MP and an ex-rough sleeper. Uncomfortable and damp, but I was going home to a hot shower. Before settling down to sleep, the ex-rough sleeper took me around the community, some of whom he knew. The lady who had a house in Morpeth, but having been abused by her father and then her husband, felt safe and in control on the streets. She was a bit of a mother figure, clean, tidy, with pink covers. Still not good for her. The man who had just come back to London, proudly explaining how he'd got clean, but needed a little something because the medication after an operation was not strong enough. My guide explained that he would be a crack addict again within a week. The boy who seemed clean, begging, saying he understood he could not just pitch up and get a flat. He was the only one I offered advice to. The point is, this is not a homogenous group of people who, if we only built more houses, their problems would be solved. There are some rough sleepers who are homeless, and don't get me wrong, sorry. Speaking to the Passage, which is in our ward, this week, I heard that they have stepped up the government's No Second Night Out scheme, where outreachers aim to bring everyone into a hostel if they find them on the streets. The Passage scheme, No Night Out, gets everyone into a B&B and then into the private rented sector within 2 weeks, or that's the aim, they told me. Yet the streets of my ward, or our ward, are constantly have tents being put up, and every day figures are curled up in sleeping bags on the cold streets, many of them on Victoria Street in front of our council. Each supermarket has someone begging in front of it. These people may be homeless, but it is more likely or that they have other problems, or as well they have other problems. And one of the things I see most, and Councillor Harvey and I get daily reports on, are drugs deals being spotted on the streets. We have building after building, both private and social, where residents are complaining about ASB and dealing. Dealing in Vincent Square has become an open event. And again, it is the vulnerable street population and rough sleepers who are being targeted by these most pernicious criminals. The street pop in our ward and often beg outside are often based in our hostels. They do have somewhere to sleep at night, which is good, but their problems are still not being solved. It seems to me that they are begging to get money to buy illegal substances. The roof over their head has not provided the solution. It's just more complicated. Some people on our streets have been failed all their lives, and some fell into substance abuse. If we want to solve the problem of rough sleeping and street population, the council has to put everything into supporting the police on catching the drug criminals who prey on those on the streets. Only then can we work to get people into homes and into steadier lives. We can also work on their other underlying issues such as mental health. Council officers should be out all day in our wards providing feedback and support to police. Addiction is not easy to solve, but if there is no tolerance for those who profit from it, then we will make a step forward. Our residents, because of these problems, deal with increased crime, fear, defecation on doorsteps, ASB in blocks, children at our schools having drug dealing normalised, and as Councillor Harvey said, today we've had a report of a boy on his way home from school being harassed. We all know that all know about this, and I just want to say it's just not acceptable. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Short. I call on Councillor Aisha Less.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Lord Mayor, homelessness is a well-documented and ongoing challenge that is felt more in Westminster than any part of London. The reasons that people end up on our streets are incredibly complex and often the result of a system's failure. Loss of housing, family or relationship breakdowns, drug and alcohol abuse. For all kinds of reasons, they may be less willing to accept homelessness provision where they live, and they end up in Westminster. There are many cases where our teams can help those who arrive, but so often we see others who are entrenched, and helping them off the streets can be very difficult. Our outreach teams engage with rough sleepers through a holistic approach, considering their physical and mental health needs and potential accommodation solutions. A joint homelessness team commissioned through the NHS provides valuable mental health support, particularly for people with complex needs. And we've pioneered the use of health beds as a step-down facility for rough sleepers discharged from hospital who still need health support. Crucially, our approach is from a place of person-centred support. At the same time, we know that rough sleeping can bring with it the challenge of antisocial behaviour, most notably the phenomenon of encampments which present new challenges. These groups often consist of those with no recourse to public funds or complex immigration backgrounds. I know that many of you here tonight, as well as residents and visitors to our city, shared my concerns about the encampment on Park Lane over the summer. The responsibility for the site lies with Transport for London, and we were clear that we would support them with their efforts in taking possession of the site. Following TfL securing a possession order, the encampment was dispersed in late October. I was on site, and I'd like to thank the officers that were on hand to ensure that it was carried out respectfully, with possessions removed and carefully stored to allow people to reclaim their belongings. We've been working closely with TfL, the Greater London Authority and other stakeholders to ensure that the land remains clear and conversations continue about long-term solution for the site. Concerns have also been raised with me about the encampments under the Westway flyover, straddling land owned by TfL and the council. The council land is now clear, and we're supporting TfL in clearing their land. The teams are looking into using a joint possession order in order to ensure that we can work with TfL quickly and flexibly in the future. Outreach teams will continue their work to ensure people's safety and welfare. Lord Mayor, there are real structural challenges to solving homelessness and rough sleeping. Westminster spends more than any other local authority, £7 million out of our own funding to support people in crisis. I am pleased that the new government's first budget sets out an immediate cash injection for our local authorities to tackle rough sleeping. Westminster will receive around £1 million to support our work, which will go some way towards meeting the demand. Crucially, we're also working across the council to pursue long-term solutions to tackle rough sleeping and homelessness. Councillor Butler-Falassis is continuing to push for mental health hospital beds, and Councillor Begum is overseeing the ramping up of our temporary accommodation acquisitions programme to tackle homelessness. There have been positive announcements from government to do more in this space, such as a task force on tackling rough sleeping, which will be led by the Deputy Prime Minister. Lord Mayor, a few issues are more heartbreaking than that of rough sleeping. The crisis is complicated and it will take time to solve. But in the meantime, our services will always be on hand to provide compassionate support for those who are vulnerable or in need. On the CCTV front, we're exploring new options using NCIL Section 106 funding to expand the service next year. The first full month of operation of the first tranche of the new cameras has now been assessed and the results are very pleasing. Footage captured of crimes and action in antisocial behaviour has been shared with police and neighbourhood coordinators as appropriate. In total, for September, the results are as follows. Total number of incidents, 63. Number of downloads via clearance, 39. Number of known arrests, 2. Number of requests for footage, 11. They're monitored on a 24/7 basis by CCTV Control Room Centre in Hammersmith and Fulham. But we continue to work really well and with our partners trying to bring those numbers up to obviously reassure our residents and businesses that these CCTV camera systems are working and doing what they're supposed to be doing. Thank you very much, Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Aisha Less. Councillor Barnes.
Lord Mayor, colleagues in the Chamber, thank you very much for the opportunity to discuss this extremely important topic and for the positive nature of the debate that we've been able to see this evening. But it's something where I would like to start by reassuring Councillor Barraclough and others that I have indeed read the draft strategy in this particular case and would like to sort of dig over some of the things that we find within it, particularly as it relates to my own ward. With some of the first observations being that, as just been echoed by Councillor Less, there is indeed a difference between homelessness and rough sleeping. Councillor Short made that excellent point in her own remarks just a few moments ago. It's the rough sleeping element that I would like to concentrate on here, and it's the one that has the most obvious and direct impact in the centre of our city and in many of the most obvious and prominent locations that we find. Perhaps the most obvious example of that, which has already been referred to in other comments, including questions from Councillor Swaddle earlier on, was in Park Lane, where we had, until recently, tents that were there for months and months and months, that were not the result of the kinds of homelessness that much of the strategy and much of the consultation efforts were there to tackle, but were the results of something much more evil, much more pernicious. Human trafficking, gangs, begging, aggressive criminal activity, people being brought in from southeastern Europe predominantly in order to carry out activity that is there to make profits for a small minority of incredibly unpleasant individuals. And we've encountered them, all of us, I'm sure, on a regular basis. We've encountered the begging. We've encountered the people who push past you and demand that you take them to a cash point. These aren't people who are there because of the kinds of need that we might all understand and emotionally want to respond to, but because they are there, brought under false pretenses and forced to take their time living rough on our streets, defecating on our doorsteps, looking out at every part of the criminality that we can see around us. And it seems to me that despite my earlier reference to the idea that there doesn't seem to be anything new in Westminster politics, that Oxford Street is back again, so too was the problem on Park Lane, which we dealt with when we led this administration back in 2020. And despite Councillor Hugg's comments earlier on, where he assured us that the lessons would be learned, I see no evidence that the lessons of 4 years ago were learned and taken on by this administration in their dealings with TfL, because they would have known from a much earlier stage that TfL were going to bungle the legal arrangements that were needed to clear those, and they would have seen through the costs and through the activities that were there that so much more could have been done and much more pressure could have been applied. And it's not just being applied because we don't like to see the tents. It's not the idea that they're an eyesore, much as that is the case, much as that it's an embarrassment to Westminster as a host to so many visitors on behalf of the country. It's because they are the functional outcome of criminal activity. And now we've seen it displaced. We've seen it displaced not just from Park Lane, but across other elements of the West End. Councillor Azamano earlier referred to Cavendish Square. That is where you can now go on a daily basis and see the same people, who many of them who were in Park Lane, who are literally shitting on our streets. Well, it's a Labour national government, so I'm fine with that. The point of it being that there are a variety of activities here where if you are simply saying that the only outcome that could possibly have been there is the result of those legal terms, I would challenge that, Councillor Fisher, purely on the basis that our outreach teams could be doing more. In 2020, this council, our council, the Conservative administration at the time, funded specialists who worked with the charities. I can't remember which of the charities it were. My colleagues will be able to inform me later on, who were from backgrounds that the individuals in those tents could relate to. They came from Southeastern Europe. Many of them had come from the kind of backgrounds and spoke the languages. And we were on occasion able to support individuals out of that and able to use their testimony to be able to intervene in the criminal gangs. I don't know if those are being supported to this day by the current administration, but I see no evidence of that. Fine, but we funded it, and have you? Right, you haven't learned the lessons from that. You're saying that 8 months on... Well, no, I wasn't here for 2 years. Don't blame me. The truth is that there hasn't been any of the continued lessons applied that you're saying was there. If you think that they should have been continued and we did wrong, then you could have put it right. You've had 2 years to put it right. But like so many things, you still think you're fighting the election of 2024 in the same way that the government is still continuing to campaign as if it's fighting the general election of 3 months ago. You're in charge. Take responsibility. And this plan, long on ambition, is short on detail. Sort it out. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Barnes, and thank you, members, for reminding me when time's up. I think I can just about see the clock. You're probably wondering why I'm stretching like that, because I haven't got a clock in front of me, unfortunately. That's another story. Anyway, Councillor de Mildenberg, the floor is yours. Thank you.
I'd like to congratulate Councillor Barnes on his second maiden speech. I don't remember his first, but can I just assure him, as a fellow sort of retread, to misquote the old song, it's much better second time around. Can I say that, if we've heard already from previous speakers, that homelessness is more than not having a home. It's often about not having a job, not having a purpose in life, not having any confidence, about being forgotten, about nobody caring. And we clearly need to build more council homes to let at council rents for people, but we also need to put the support in place on a continuing basis to help some of the most vulnerable people in society, whether they be former soldiers, former prisoners, current and former drug and alcohol addicts, or those with mental health issues and simply cannot cope. And so the after question is, so what can we do about this? I want to just put something on the table, which is the Council's Community Contribution Scheme. The fund was created 6 years ago to give residents the opportunity to give more to their local community on a voluntary basis. And so far, 27 projects have provided extra support for people who find themselves sleeping on Westminster streets, helping rough sleepers rebuild their lives. And I want to mention one of those projects, Hotel School, founded by Jeremy Goring of the Goring Hotel, working with the Passage and Westminster Kingsway Catering College in Vincent Square. It's founded by Jeremy Goring after his experience of talking to the rough sleepers on Victoria Street opposite his well-known hotel. Hotel Schools teaches hospitality skills to homeless and vulnerable people, matches them to sustainable employment and supports them in their first steps into work. These projects offer practical help to real people who are homeless and have associated problems. And I want to tell a couple of stories. Victoria. Victoria had not worked for 14 years after a long period of homelessness and was referred to Hotel School by crisis. After successful completion of the Hotel School programme in August 22, she was offered employment straight away with a roastery and cafe. When Victoria first started the programme, her confidence was extremely low. Over time, her confidence grew, and 2 years later, in August 24, Victoria celebrated 2 years of working full-time. She's now planning her next step in her career and thinking about moving into a hotel kitchen to grow and develop her skills as a chef. Another story is Yared. Yared arrived in the UK as a refugee in 2022. After a period of rough sleeping, StreetLink helped him into a secure temporary shelter. A friend and former Hotel School graduate then recommended Hotel School to him. Yared began the programme in January 2024, and despite facing multiple challenges, including housing issues, he attended every day. And having been turned down by many employers before finding Hotel School, Yared struggled with a low level of English and a lack of self-confidence. He took barista training and was invited for a part-time food and beverage runner position. He's now been employed for almost 6 months and has transitioned to full-time. He's studying hard with the aim of progressing to a waiter position soon. These are real people, previously homeless, whose lives have been transformed by giving the opportunity to help and work in Westminster's hospitality industry directly through a council-funded scheme, along with many others who funded Hotel School. In December, the 20th cohort of graduates will be celebrating their graduation, and I hope to be with them. I hope, too, that we continue to offer financial support to Hotel School and others who do similar work. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor de Milderberg. Councillor Kaplan.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I thought that I would have a bit of a problem when I was about to give this speech, but the problem I'm about to have is one that I had not imagined. So we've had good speeches from Councillor Harvey, Councillor Short, Councillor Barnes, and I thought, well, they're probably going to take a lot of my sort of thunder away by talking about all the key issues in relation to this, and that was my main concern. I could never imagine that I was about to follow Councillor de Milderberg and actually finding myself, agreeing with quite a lot of the content he was just talking about. I was involved in the first 4 or 5 years of the City of Westminster Charitable Trust, and I agree, it's done an amazing sort of job. Some of the grants that Councillor McAllister nodding away there, some of the amazing sort of organisations and groups that it was able to forward, have been absolutely sort of fantastic, and I echo some of the comments that Councillor de Milderberg has said. This could be the first and last time, Paul. I'm not sure whether we're about to agree on each other. Normally it's just football that you and I agree on, but there we go. But you make your point very well, and I think it's something that a number of members on this side are aware of this, that were involved in it. The City of Westminster Charitable Trust has done a great job. In terms of the strategy document, strategy document, we can all look at it. Yes, I've read it, and a number of colleagues have read it as well, and there's a lot of good things in it. But documents are a piece of paper, it's a moment in time, it's actually practically what happens and what you do about the real issues that a number of my colleagues have talked about that matter in relation to this. I was reminded when I was thinking about this sort of speech what I was going to say, that it's actually 30 years since I chaired the Westminster Housing Committee as it was then. You know, it was before the sort of cabinet system, so my history in housing matters goes back over 30 years. Sadly, some of the issues that existed 30 years ago still exist today. I mean, we've talked about rough sleeping, we've talked about homelessness issues. You know, these are issues in a place like Westminster that don't go away. Some of the things change in terms of the unfortunate trafficking issues that we now see, some of the appalling situations that people face, but some of the issues with veterans and soldiers on the streets, they're not new. Those have existed in the past. And I think we have to be very careful how we seek to address these issues. And in the comments I'm about to make about some local things in my own ward, these are not directed personally at sort of people, but there are things that do have to be said, and Councillor Less, you and I have been in communication on a number of these sort of things, and you know, I will talk about tents in my area because it's something which is raised with me on a daily basis, and I can't not talk about that because it's something that, as I walk around the ward on a daily basis, it's something I see and emails I get literally every day, sometimes 4 or 5 a day, you know, in relation to that. I'm pleased that the general tone of this debate has been the right sort of tone, because this is a really, really serious topic. And I know that all members on both sides, we all care passionately. Most of us in this chamber are very fortunate in our lives and what affects us on a daily basis, but some of the cases that we see out on the streets, there are some very unfortunate people that have major issues. What I would say is that we don't necessarily help those people by thinking that the problem will go away and waiting to take action, as Councillor Barnes talked about so earlier on. And I do have criticism in relation to our work with TfL. The tents under the Westway have been there more than 7 months. I've been told on many occasions that we're coordinating with TfL to try and deal with these issues. Well, I'm sorry, but TfL is an organisation that this is not a top priority for them, and therefore we have to do more than coordinate. And as I said in the last council meeting to you, Councillor Less, that we need to get the possession orders, not rely on TfL. That is not going to work. There are still 2 sites in my ward, St Mary's Square, and actually next to King Solomon's Primary, where we've got tents. You know, and that's nothing to do with TfL. Those are on our land, and we have to deal with them. I'm sorry that 7 months is too long for tents to be in our city. And the reason I say that is that the very vulnerable people, and they are very vulnerable people that we're dealing with in each of these cases, that is too long for them to become institutionalised for the life that they're leading in those tents, in those sort of areas. Outreach workers have been there on 6 or more occasions. This is not a question of, you know, trying to help them into other sort of options. This is a situation where we have to take more timely action. Anything that lasts for 7 months is 7 months too long, and we're not helping the people that live there. And of course, we're not helping any of the residents that live around it and say, what the hell is going on? Why is it going on and on and on? So my final point is that you need to take the responsibility. You're in power. It's your job now. These issues do not go away, and they do not go away if they ignore them. So please be timely, take action, and use the legal powers that we have. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Caplan. I would ask now Councillor Begum to reply.
Thank you, Lord Mayor, and thank you to my colleagues from across the floor for contributing to this debate. Homelessness in all its guises has a devastating impact on those who must live through it, whether it's the emotional toll of unstable accommodation or the long-term health implications that are visited on those sleeping rough. For the wider community, rough sleeping in particular can bring with it antisocial behaviour, and I am grateful to Councillor Less for working with officers and our partners to deliver a visible response to tackling ASB. While rough sleeping can impact businesses and communities, let's not forget that our services should and always will be centred around the individual that finds themselves on the street for whatever reason. We recently saw the Park Lane encampment, where our outreach services worked very hard to support the most vulnerable in our community. During this time, I was appalled but not surprised at the lack of concern shown by the opposition for rough sleepers. The opposition were more concerned about clearing up Park Lane because it was an eyesore for tourists and showed absolute disregard for the welfare of rough sleepers. But that's no surprise. After After all, former Home Secretary Suella Braverman once described street homelessness as a lifestyle choice. I think it's important here to remind the opposition of their failure in tackling rough sleeping. In 2019, the Conservative Party promised to end the blight of rough sleeping by the end of the next Parliament, but instead we saw the numbers of rough sleepers double. Earlier this year, Shelter's Chief Executive, Polly Neate, said about the former government, the government had 5 long years to honour its own pledge to end rough sleeping, but instead it failed, allowing the number of people sleeping rough to double on its watch and abandoning thousands of people to the trauma of living on the streets. Shelter said there had been decades of failure to build genuinely affordable social homes, and this combined with record high private rents had seen an increase in the number of people forced to sleep in flimsy tents or in sleeping bags on the street corners. Across London, local authorities are grappling with a homelessness crisis that has been decades in the making. London Council estimates that 183,000 Londoners are to be homeless, with record numbers of people living in temporary accommodation, amongst them 90,000 children. Street homelessness is growing, and the pressure on homelessness services to respond is immense. In Westminster, the increasing demand and cost of TA remains a significant pressure. The number of households in TA rose from 2,699 in April 2022 to 3,875 at the end of October 2024. That is a 35% increase. This demand is driven by a combination of factors, including the increasing use of Section 21 evictions, which should hopefully be abolished via the Renters' Right Bill, and the unaffordability of private rented accommodation to support the Council's response to the increasing demand for TA. £178 million has been made available through the TA acquisition programme. This will reduce the Council's reliance on third-party accommodation providers and give better oversight of the quality and suitability of properties that we are placing households in, as well as providing them with a much-needed certainty around tenure. And in the same vein of accountability, in July, this administration voted to insource parts of our housing solution service. This means that from April 2025, for the first time in 20 years, functions including frontline housing advice, homelessness prevention, and housing assessments will be brought back into direct control, strengthening the Council's focus on prevention by improving earlier intervention and delivering support that is responsive and empathetic. That is Fairer Westminster in action. On Sunday, the consultation closed for the Homelessness and Rough Sleeping Strategy. This will set the Council's overall direction in supporting those at risk or experiencing homelessness and rough sleeping. The Council's lived experience co-production group has been instrumental in drafting this strategy. It is vital that their experience is captured, and I am proud that our proposed future service delivery has been shaped by their experiences. Looking ahead to the colder winter months, our winter plan for 2024-25 was launched in October earlier than in previous years, and will deliver an additional 280 beds. This is truly a cross-council response with public health, adult social care and public protection and licensing, working with housing services to ensure a cohesive, person-centred approach to rough sleeping and its associated activities during the winter and prolonged periods of bad weather. Lord Mayor, homelessness is not inevitable. While the demand for our services is increasing, this Council is working hard to deliver change that will focus on prevention, outreach, and above all, empathy to those facing the uncertainty of homelessness. Only yesterday, the leader of the Council gave evidence on rough sleeping at the Housing Community and Local Government Committee. With a Labour Council, a Labour Mayor, and the first ever Labour MP for this constituency, I believe we'll definitely do a better job than the previous administration.
So that actually concludes the debate on the item issued by the opposition party. Okay, we're now moving to the voting aspect on the 4 reports listed on the agenda. The first, please. The first vote on the recommendations of the report listed under agenda item 11 and entitled Planning and City Development Committee and Subcommittee Future Options and Committee Proportionality. The recommendations are deemed to have been moved and seconded. By a show of hands, can I ask those in favour? Those against? Those abstaining?
Bravely abstaining.
I declare the recommendations agreed. We will now vote on the recommendation. The debate is finished. We're now going on to the voting, please. We will now vote on the recommendation of the report listed under agenda item 12 and entitled Proposed Readoption of the Council's Statement of Principles for Gambling. The recommendation is deemed to have been moved and seconded. By a show of hands, can I ask those in favour? Thank you. Those against? Those abstaining? I declare the recommendation agreed. We will now move to vote on the recommendation. We will now move to the vote on the recommendation of the report listed under agenda item 13 and entitled Dispensation of Absence. The recommendation is deemed to have been moved and seconded. By a show of hands, can I ask those in favour? Those against? Those abstaining? I declare the recommendation agreed. Finally, we will now move on to the vote on the recommendations of the report listed under agenda item 14 and entitled Programme of Meetings 2025 to 2026. The recommendations are deemed to have been moved and seconded. By a show of hands, can I ask those in favour? Those against? Those abstaining? I declare the recommendations agreed. So, that concludes the council meeting. Thank you and good night.